Leslie, tells Luke that they are lucky he was a failure. She says she never would have been attracted to someone who was a professional baseball star. To which Luke, 35 years old and the best center fielder the North Shore Men's Slow Pitch League has ever seen, replies, "If I'd been a star, you'd have never met me. You wouldn't have gotten near me." "True," Leslie replies, sipping from a mug of green tea and surveying the disaster that is their living room. Plastic fruits and vegetables all over the place, and dolls abandoned in positions that make them look severely injured. "You probably would have ended up marrying some vapid model, just like Johnny Damon did." "And I'd be totally miserable," Luke says. "You bet," Leslie replies. "You'd be questioning what it all meant. Fame and money and beautiful, stupid women." Luke takes a swallow of coffee, which tastes burnt from the extra hour it spent on the hot pad this morning before he finally got out of bed. It's a Saturday. The girls are on the couch in their pajamas, mesmerized by a Clifford video they know by heart. He thumbs through the sports section of the Boston Globe, sees that Johnny Boy is mouthing off again, still can't get over the rude reception from the fans at Fenway earlier in the week. What did he expect? As Leslie put it, back when his defection to the Yankees was announced, "He's doing to us the same thing he did to his first wife." Yes, Luke thinks now, and Damon probably doesn't understand why she's angry at him too. But he decides not to disclose this to Leslie because he does not want to spend the next half hour talking about it. One of the pleasant surprises about Leslie when they met a decade ago was that she had zero interest in the sport of baseball. Luke had washed out of the minors by then and had signed on for a season in an independent league with the Elmira Pioneers, a team consisting largely of players who had not yet learned to read the writing on the wall. There were stories of guys being discovered by Major League scouts while hitting the crap out of the ball, but the stories were like the ones you hear about someone winning the lottery in your town. If anything, they make your odds seem more remote. It was during the 7-hour bus ride from Elmira to Lynn, a squeaky windshield wiper making it impossible for him to sleep, that Luke concluded that his chances were zilch. That night at Old Fraser Field against the Massachusetts Mad Dogs, Luke went 3 for 4 with 2 doubles and a stolen base, and the old feeling came back that this was what he was put on earth to do. Yet the next afternoon, not long before he was due to report for batting practice, there he was at the Lynn Public Library, trying to find the career help section. Leslie was the librarian, and Luke remembers thinking that she looked the part. Sorry if there's any librarians in the audience. Auburn hair, nod and back, unfashionable glasses with large round lenses. Though she did not actually take him by the hand and lead him to what he was looking for, it now seems as if he did. In the hushed tone required by the surroundings, she asked what Luke's background was, and Luke replied, "My background? The kind of jobs you've done, your education. I graduated from high school, does that help? It means you don't have to go back and get your GED. What kind of work have you been doing?" "I'm a baseball player," Luke said, which must have sounded the same to Leslie except he proclaimed himself a Boy Scout. "I play for a team from Elmira, New York. We're in town to play the Mad Dogs." "The Mad Dogs?" There was an arching of eyebrows and a mild, unreadable smile. "The team that plays at Fraser Field," Luke said. "I see," Leslie replied, though she showed no indication of recognizing the stadium's name. "And you're tired of playing baseball now. You want to do something else." "It's not that I'm tired." She raised a finger as if to shush him, and Luke said in a much quieter voice, "Sorry, it's not that I'm tired of playing baseball. It's just..." What he had tried to say, but couldn't, was that he wasn't a good enough ball player to make a living at it. He couldn't say this because he wasn't sure it was true, but he also couldn't say it because it might be true. He didn't know. "It's just that I have to quit. I can feel it right here, in my gut," he said, tapping 2 fingers against his abdominal muscles. "It's not working out." He lowered his head, wanting her pity but not wanting much of it. If there was too much, he would put on his swagger mask, the one he wore in the batter's box. He would brusquely thank her for her help and leave. "It's always hard to change courses," she said matter-of-factly. "So you've been playing baseball professionally ever since you graduated high school?" Luke explained how he'd been chosen by the Toronto Blue Jays in the third round of the 1990 draft. But he also had to explain how the draft worked and why a team from Toronto played in the American League. He told her about Dunedin, Florida, and Syracuse, and how just before the players' strike in 1994, he made his Major League debut against the Yankees in Yankee Stadium, and waited for her to be impressed. Then he asked her, in too loud a voice, if she'd meet him for a drink after tonight's game. An elderly gentleman looked up from the newspaper he was reading as Leslie gazed back at him with the slightest of smiles, while Luke waited anxiously for her reply. Everyone in North Reading, the town where Leslie grew up and where Luke now works as Parks and Recreation Director, assumes that Luke must be a huge baseball fan, having played professional baseball himself. In the spring, he receives a small additional stipend from the high school for his work as a special instructor to the baseball team. His duties, as described in the contract he received, involve providing technical advice on hitting, fielding, and other aspects of baseball. But Luke is also expected to regale the lads, and for that matter the coaching staff, with stories from his playing days. Of particular interest are the future stars whose paths crossed Luke's in the minor leagues. And the most popular story of all concerns the time that Luke, having been released by the Blue Jays and picked up by the Colorado Rockies, found himself in Wichita, Kansas, playing for the Tulsa Drillers against a team whose leadoff hitter was a hot-hitting 21-year-old named Johnny Damon. What makes the story rich is that Luke and Damon were similar prospects, slender left-hand hitting outfielders with excellent speed and reputations for recklessly pursuing fly balls, though Stadelman had a better throwing arm. On this particular night in Wichita, however, Damon was hitting close to .350, and within a week would join the Kansas City Royals and never play in the minor leagues again. Stadelman, who hated Tulsa as much as any player has ever hated any place, a year later would find himself in the reference section of the Lynn Public Library, unable to stop thinking about the librarian who had agreed to meet him that night for a drink. But all those things were in the future. That night in Wichita, the wind blew hot off the prairie, curling the American flag high above the center field fence, causing fly balls to flutter like kites. In the first inning, Luke staggered towards what should have been a routine out, lost his hat as he tumbled. The ball lodged in the crease of his glove. The crowd sighed in disappointment as he got to his knees and held the ball aloft. As he turned back towards where he would position himself for the next batter, a gust of wind carried an odor that was almost putrid, fertilizer or stockyards. Luke was not sure which. At bat, the prairie wind was Luke's friend. Damon couldn't reach a ball that got up against the wall in right center, and Luke took advantage of Damon's girlish way of throwing to beat the relay throw for a triple. 2 innings later, Damon was at the wall again, but this time didn't even make the effort of leaping. The ball disappeared into the dark, and as Luke rounded the bases, he heard the public address guy announce in a muted voice, "Home run, Luke Stadelman." The final score was 5-4. The final out recorded when Luke, his back to home plate and the wind in his ears, made an over-the-shoulder catch on the warning track, turning just in time so that his shoulders absorbed the force of his body, slamming backwards against the wall. Luke gets tired of telling this story, but it is what people want to hear. He never speaks of what happened at Yankee Stadium. So what time's your softball game today? Leslie says in the living room, where the Clifford video has ended and the girls are demanding they be allowed to watch it again. Katie's lower lip is quivering, and big girl Jill gazes at her mom in a way that makes her look like a miniature teenager, arms folded against her belly and staring at the rug. 2 games, actually, Luke says. The first one starts at 1 o'clock. So I'll be alone with these 2 all afternoon. Why not bring them along to watch, Luke says. I think the field we're playing at has a playground near it. It'd be good for them to see what their dad actually does. You make it sound like that's how you support the family, Leslie says. You know what I mean, Luke replies. But he's not quite sure what he means. A line from Springsteen's Glory Days enters his head and leaves you with nothing, mister, but boring stories. Leslie had told him that the song is a real crowd pleaser between innings at Fenway, thanks to its raucous chorus. Luke wouldn't know. He hasn't been to the ballpark since back when you could drive in on the day of the game and still buy tickets. And then next week is that tournament, Leslie says, and you'll be gone for the whole weekend. The statement is part lament, part question. Luke says, Yes, I'll be gone for the whole weekend, including Friday. I'm going to have some fun for a change. So will I, Leslie replies. I'll leave the girls to fend for themselves, and I'll go off drinking and dancing with my friends. Why not get your dad to watch them? Wrong generation, Luke. He'd just sit them down in front of the TV all night. But is that the worst thing in the world? Leslie gives him her librarian stare, a pursing of her lips and a narrowing of her eyes. They watch too much as it is, the days when you're the one who's home alone. Which is each Monday, ever since town meeting, following the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen, voted to reduce Luke's hours as a cost-saving measure. Leslie's dad, Stan Hisdale, has been a selectman ever since Leslie was in high school, and in this case discreetly recused himself from the vote. Stan Hinsdale, as everyone knows, is the reason Luke was given the Parks and Rec job in the first place. In every other town, the person who holds this job has a college degree. Luke sat quietly through the town meeting discussion as several people rose to say nice things about him before recommending that his salary be reduced by 20%. Okay, I'm sorry, he says. I won't go to Syracuse next weekend. It's not like my teammates are counting on me. I mean, I'm sure they can find someone else who can play center field every bit as well as I can, and can hit for power, and go from first to home on a hit to the outfield. It's not like any of us are interested in winning. If my absence costs us the chance to become tournament champions, none of the guys will mind. We're just out to have fun. Leslie rolls her eyes, and Luke wishes he had stopped about 4 sentences earlier. The scary thing is how much these games matter to him. It's softball, after all. They might as well be putting the ball on a goddamn tee. The gossip around town is that Luke is under the delusion that some major league scout is going to see him tearing up the local slow pitch league and invite him for a tryout. Just like in that movie about the 37-year-old pitcher. Luke, as Leslie knows, is not delusional. But when the ball is hit over his head, something kicks in that he can't really control. Last season, he came home one night with a gash across his cheek and swelling on his knee, courtesy of the galvanized fence he collided with. But the important thing, he said, he really said this, is that I managed to hang on to the ball. 2 runs, maybe 3, come in if it goes off my glove. Afterwards, he felt ridiculous for saying that. In the courses he'd taken at North Shore Community College,